you want to join, it's $10 if you live in town. It's $20 if you don't live in town.
We do have some developers that live in town, though. So that's the only thing to consider.
Well, that was my. I mean, that's where I was going is could we do? Because you see that in other facets of government where if you can't pay or you don't feel like you fall like based on income or whatever, you can't qualify for. You shouldn't be paying as high of a rate. You can do a hardship application.
We do have a lot of applications and processes already. This would just add on to that with staff time.
Let me just point out, we're talking about a line item, correct, of $110,000 so far this year. That doesn't move the needle. I don't know how you can increase it to move the needle. Right. The revenue side is 7.7 from taxes, million. What we're talking about now is
Yes.
fine to have those ideas, but I'm not sure that's going to move the needle in a big way. I think that's what you're saying.
Yeah, basically. I mean, we can raise them if you want. I wouldn't do it the full scale, but the issues that we have right now are larger, I would say.
I'm not advocating that just as a revenue measure. I'm also trying to picture, because my understanding from Mac is it needs to be reasonable. So if you are too far out of line, then that's a great argument for your fees are no longer.
And to the 110, these are not the only fees that go in that line. While they are definitely the majority, there's about $5,000 or $6,000 of that are not even the fees that we're discussing. So, exactly.
Not a discouraged conversation about that. Sure. There might be a right way to do that.
No, but I thought if we went somewhere in the neighborhood of 25%, 50% of the fee based on staff time number, you know, I feel like every cent counts in terms of what we bring in, and that's a relatively simple way to do it.
What's your recommendation, Mike, to think about it? 50% of staff time, which would be in that first line item, $2,700 instead of $2,250, something like that. Is that permissible to a percentage of staff time across the board?
I think it's definitely permissible according to Mac's guidance. It's policy. So we could definitely set that at a 50% rate.
But then the site plan review, 50% is 9,000 versus the current 12. So
Bring it up to focus on conditional zonings.
It'd be nice to have a count here, or average count, because $75 for a simple permit, I mean, even if you raise it, yeah, I mean, it's not gonna really move the bar at all. Maybe you just focus on site plan review and the high complexity zoning request.
Well, we just don't know. For example, I mean, the Stevens Village is a very high complexity conditional zoning, but so is their general rezoning. And then there's the regular general rezoning that doesn't take very much staff time. But when we had the Stevens Mill Road, I can't remember the exact number, the White House that got rezoned recently, I mean, I was meeting with people weekly on a fee that was probably $600. So we just don't know. I thought that was going to be a simple one, but the Shenandoah residents got mail notices about that and picked that up and were concerned.
So you say, well, there's a good chunk of time in some of these that it's really responding to residents as well. It's not just interacting with developers.
Yeah, like for example, those simple admin permits could be a simple fence permit someone submits.
Right, but for the conditional zonings, like Stevens Village, for example.
For the complex ones, no, I'm meeting with the developer weekly and so with residents as well.
Right, but those numbers include resident time.
Yes,
Yeah.
they do.
Let's put a pin in this if you don't mind, because
Sure. As already been mentioned, stormwater fund is balanced, with the $67 residential and ERU, for non-residential already. So we're not proposing changing that fee, and there is no appropriation of fund balance for that fund. As already mentioned as well, we did either cut or push into the future $543,600 from the notable items list. And then we also made a lot of, what I call kind of nickel and diamond things. Okay, $500 decrease here, $1,000 decrease on this line item. So we've already done a lot of that internally as well. So, we have cut this budget significantly before even bringing it to you for recommendation. But ultimately, this is our recommendation, is the 2-cent tax increase. We were proposing no change to the fee schedule, but again, we will do what y'all want us to do.
On stormwater.
Mm-hmm.
Because that's this item out.
It's a separate fund.
Yeah, it's, nothing's needed now, but how's that projecting going forward?
Stormwater's doing fine. I mean, if you want to talk specifics about projects and things, that would be Kevin's area, but that fund, as far as financially, has no issues.
So it's the $67 is keeping it well funded, or funded enough to do our needs.
It is, yes.
I think the movement towards doing a lot of the work in-house is one of the driving factors behind making that more sustainable. Before we were contracting out a lot of things, and that was just really expensive, especially the scale, mobilizing contractors for a bunch of different small projects. Kevin, is there anything else you'd like to add to that?
No, I think just to put it in perspective, projects that we were contracting out and spending 10 grand on the contractors, we're doing in-house for $1,000, $2,000, and that's just material. So, we're faster, we're cheaper, we're doing a better job. When it comes to, there's larger scale projects that we have to contract out, but our budget will sufficiently fund that.
And do you keep a reserve?
We do.
It's $1 million? Or what was it?
The policy is $1 million, yes, but we have more than that.
'Cause that's my only concern is I don't want to, at some point, we're going to have to hit taxpayers are going to have to pay, unfortunately, more. I don't want to hit them with regular taxes and then also stormwater at the same time. That's what I wanted to ask.
Sure.
So they're good for like 5-year projection. Oh, you're good.
Yeah, I don't foresee us needing to raise that, knock on wood, anytime soon. We're gonna have a bigger bridge replacement project in the future. But even still, I think that would be within our budget. We might need to dip into that reserve a little bit, but it would not deplete any.
Contract you guys out for other towns. Make a little money on the side.
So the bottom line, which has been stated multiple times, is yes, the current tax rate can fund the budget, but it does not put us on a sustainable path long-term. And so that's what we are really looking at. And while there was a lot of discussion going on, I did the math real quick to give you those exact fund balance numbers. With the 2-cent tax increase, 144,665 is restricted funds, and then 194,900 is just to balance the budget for those capital items. But we have much more than $195,000 worth of capital items. With the current tax rate, it's the same 144,665 in restricted funds because they're restricted. And then $1,013,000 of fund balance appropriation to balance the budget. And when we say the budget's balanced, yes, we're using fund balance, but the budget is balanced based on the statutory definition of what a balanced budget
I need
is.
you to come talk to my wife. She would tell you, she does not care, you are wrong.
I can relate to that and understand that logic, but it's balanced when we have an ordinance that says we can have this much revenue, including fund balance, and this much in expenditures.
I just need the statute so I can send it to my wife.
I can send it.
On the 5-year forecast, I always.
Which one?
Both,
Okay,
current year,
okay.
current tax rate. I always encourage the council to understand the assumed increase in projections. I'm always the one who says, I think we're very conservative, but I know we have to be, so I appreciate you doing that for us. I'm looking across the top line, ad valorem taxes, 7.63 million projected this year.
Mm-hmm.
That's 110, but over here on the actuals, it looks like we're running 7.774. Actuals plus encumbrances through March, and I know we're probably done. But, so we've collected more in 2026 than budgeted, right?
We have, and I just haven't updated these projections since we got that additional last little bit of money in March, so I apologize.
No, I'm not
But
looking-
yes, you're,
I'm not looking for errors, what I'm looking for or things you haven't updated. I'm just looking for trends.
mm-hmm,
If I take that 5-year forecast number, FY 26, 7630, and I grow it by 2.2%, but everything else seems to pencil out. But I always just want to make sure that we understand, number one, that we're projecting an assumed increase of ad valorem. Seems like we do better than that, but I know we have to be conservative.
and just to point out, those assumed increases are for 28 and forward. I used what I actually have, or what we have in the actual proposed budget for the 27 numbers. Yes,
And then it runs at 2.2%.
correct.
Then, so
And
same for like Powellville.
Right.
Remind us how that is funded?
Powellville is funded by the state. I forget the exact formula. Part of it is based on the number of road miles. And until they actually do something with the budget, that's just going to remain at the same amount that it is. But the thing about Powellville is the net impact to this budget, it's zero. So the expenditures equal what we're budgeting in Powellville revenue. If we receive more than that, we can just come and do an ABO, or we can do what we're doing with this 27 budget and appropriating those remaining funds in the following year.
So what if we got more Powellville? We have a street maintenance budget of 1.4. Powellville plus
$800,000 from the town.
Powellville is more than 4,000?
It's around I think we got about 560 this year.
Right, okay. It feels like where we've saved money in the past is by taking that quote promised 800,000 a year, or 1.2, I thought it was, Alex, that we were gonna put towards street maintenance. Now I feel like it's gone to 1.4. Plus Powellville has gone up a little bit as well. So I just want to, and then we're doing the slurry micro-surfacing. I feel like the only opportunity to save money in this budget is personnel and street maintenance. I'm curious just about that dialogue about, can we save money on street maintenance? Then the last question I have would be just the police funding plan. Covered the 2 new officers coming on board this coming year. Is that the end of the funding plan, and
Yeah,
we're
so
fully staffed?
There's 2 more next year as well. When I say next year, I mean fiscal year 27, 28. So last year, we added 2.
Which is in this 5-year projection, you think?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. That's in there. So that in our current fiscal year that we're in now, we added two. The fiscal year that we're talking about now, we're proposing adding two, and then we call for an additional two the following year.
I just think the message to the community is, no offense, chief, I love you, but if you want a police force, how many staff do we have and how many are police? Percentage-wise?
I'd say about 50% is police. Is that about right, Karen, you think?
I'd say it's more.
You think it's more?
I think it's more than half.
Okay.
Yeah. If you're
Oh.
counting non-sworn officers that are police, then I feel pretty confident it's more than half are police.
That's the decision I think the town makes is the personnel costs are driving the budget up every year. I appreciate bringing things in-house instead of contracting things out because we save money, but we also, that causes us to add people to do the in-house work. That's shooting ourselves in the foot. So as long as Kevin at his current level can handle the use of equipment and all that stuff, that works. But as soon as Kevin says, gosh, we're doing so much work in-house now that we need to add another person, well, then we should have just contracted. I mean, that's sort of hard to fathom. My last question, I said, 10% projected personnel cost increases in all the scenarios. Are we able to do that?
We're actually seeing more than that. That's actually a conservative increase. Mm-hmm.
Like 16 or 15%?
Well, the thing to keep in mind is we've been adding staff. So, you know, it's hard to, when you're doing it like this at this level, to really calculate exactly how much is new staff versus how much is true increases without getting into it at every single little itty bitty line. And so we just kind of picked a 10% conservatively.
But you're really conservative on the revenue, but you're really not conservative on the staffing, so that's the problem.
Uh-huh.
I mean, you know what I mean? We've got 2.2% revenue growth, and I think it's gonna be more. But then on something like staff, it's gonna maybe be 13 or 14, and yet we're lowballing it to kind of make the budget, so that concerns me.
We based it on projections too, past performance, both on the revenue side.
On the revenue side, right?
And also on that, we actually dropped it down, we made it more conservative than the trends are. I do a couple things, one, it's adding police, right, it's adding positions. And two, we also, those trend numbers include, some pretty gnarly COVID-related inflationary increases. And you recall that the board, I think there was one that was like 7 or 8 or 9%.
Yeah.
And you recall the board put a cap on the CPI increases of 5%. So that takes the top a little bit off of that. So that's all we felt going on. But I think your point is right, is that the revenue numbers are much lower than the percentages of the expenditure numbers. When you have that, naturally, you're going to have deficits come. So, valid point. I don't want to dismiss it or minimize it.
We also had a salary study last year that gave some additional increases too, so.
Right, but what we're saying is, yeah, not putting words in mouth.
It's hard to really, truly
We got the pension
factor that in.
system that we have to get.
Yeah, we don't control that, right? And we've been seeing for years 1% increase on the sworn officer side and a 0.75 increase on the non-sworn. But Karen does a good job of trying to get us the lowest insurance rates we can have, so.
Not the only staff we're adding is the 2 police this year.
But there is the administrative assistant at the front.
And
I don't love the 2 cents,
what does this take into account developments that are gonna come online this year?
To do the tax revenue, I use the numbers that the county gives me. That's what I'm using to do those. And so they're telling me, these are your valuations as of right now. And so no, to answer your question.
That's why I think they're conservative, because farms will come online in the next 5 years.
Someone across from school.
Neighborhood across from school, so, yeah, we can't capture all of that.
The new econ.
But nothing would be done within the next year.
Yeah.
Scottish Green comes online in 2 years, so, yeah, it's not a,
In the next 12 months?
Every single developer says they're going to, but I have no idea.
Oh, okay.
yeah.
Well, Willows is under construction, but they got sewer capacity, 2 months ago.
Willows is the one,
The apartment complex on Stevens Mill.
Stevensville, the one up Stevensville.
Yeah.
But it's just dirt right now. I drove by it last week. There's nothing.
So, yeah, I don't know what to think about that, but, it feels like, is that built into the 2.2 number? Could it be, because based on trends, we've also had development the last 5, 6 years pretty healthy. That's why I'm always hopeful that sitting here next year, we'll see what we're seeing this year. Hey, we collect more taxes than we thought we would.
Well, and we do have to be conservative on the taxes. There is statute that tells us we cannot budget for more than we received in the prior year. So like if we received 99% of our taxes, we cannot budget more than 99% of the tax levy that we calculate based on the values we receive from the county. We cannot do that, so.
Apartment complex behind the Harris Teeter. Come on.
Yes.
Okay, so
So then, if it's online, it would be in the values that the county has given me for this year. Because they gave me values within the last couple months.
well, I mean, but remember when
Yeah.
Epcon came in on your side of town, they didn't change the values. Those apartments still stayed really low for the first couple of years or something. So I guess that would be my
I can
question.
look it up. Yeah, yeah, but I mean, I think that's all theme around the same point, is that there's a lot of development, either built, not started, that are gonna influence this, and is the 2.2 the right number, and Jesse's being conservative. But that's why I'm hopeful that we'll sit here next year and say,
And the two, and the,
Okay, I thought they were moving into a green. So what is our fund balance been the last? Because I'm seeing 16 million, and I thought, I mean, when we saw a budget a couple years ago, that it was closer down to the 10 million, I mean, we're getting close to 10 million.
well, there's a
16
difference. So fund balance is a little tricky. There's a difference between what's available and what we have. Those are two different things. And some of it is restricted fund balance. We have a fund balance policy that says we must maintain at least 34%. Part of that's a cash flow issue. I mean, even last Friday, I had to transfer money from the trust account to our general fund checking account just to pay the bills, because we're now in a point where we are not regularly receiving big lump sums of money. And so that's why we've really got to make sure we do have a fund balance. But they're all different. There's a stabilization by state statute calculation that factors into that. There's a lot more to it than just saying we have X dollars in the bank and we can spend all of that.
I appreciate that, but what I think I say this every year, I have, in my mind, especially as a taxpayer, but the public, the town is sitting on $16 million, why are you raising my taxes, right? Like, use some of that you've used before to cover the gap. So just I can
that breakdown, that'd be great, because.
Okay,
I should ask this earlier.
It's like, I'd love to have Kurt's answer on that, because that's a philosophical, really good question. You got a manager here and you got a manager here. The citizen who says, y'all have $16 million in this balance, some of it's restricted, blah, blah, blah.
There were two instances, 9/11 and then after the housing meltdown in 2007, 2008, where the city of Charlotte's revenues plummeted both times. From the 9/11, it was sales tax, and for the 2007, 2008, it was property tax because everything got revalued at a much lower rate. So, but for a significant fund balance, we would have had to have sharply cut services immediately. Really, that would have been the only option because we couldn't, you can only set the tax rate once a year. And so, you have to have, in my opinion, you have to have cash in the bank in order to avoid those draconian things. They do come around. You know, once every 10 years, something bad seems to happen to municipal revenues. It could very well be the General Assembly that does something to your ability to raise or have property. So that's what I would say to a citizen, that just like in our own financial situations, we need to have a rainy day fund, and the town is no different in needing to have a rainy day fund. How big it is, I will say the world is entirely different now. The targets when I was budget director and city manager were 8%, 34. Everybody has moved, and the
the LGC,
LGC,
the 30,
Commission has moved as well because of financial issues that particularly smaller towns across the state. And so my mind is at a much lower level, but you're comparable with what I see in other places. I think Matthews is exactly 34%. Some others are considerably higher. And so I can see why the citizen would say, just spend what you have. And there's probably a margin in there you could do, which is probably about the margin that they have done. But to avoid having to lay off half your workers when sales tax tanks for some reason, then that's why you would have fund balance. That's what I would say, Brandon.
So I guess I should step back and say that I'm not against it, right? And I'm not saying we should reset our 34%. That seems reasonable, 34% of your budget. That gets you through rainy days. I'm looking at, we're at 114% of our budget, which if we got no money next year, we could fund with fund balance and still carry over some money to the following year. I mean, that's like just the absolute doomsday, and at that point, we might as well, we're all dead anyways. That's kind of where I'm at, and I see we're progressing. Eventually, we will dip below 34%. I do not ever want to be in that situation. But I also have an issue with, like, this year, should we bring it back down to maybe 100%? And should we also have a cap where we don't ever have a fund balance that's over 100%? Because it makes no sense to me to have we're saying that next year's expenses, we actually have more in the bank than we need to even cover those expenses. It's kind of like Harvard, right? Like, you can go to Harvard for free now because their endowment is more than they need. Yeah.
In perpetuity.
Yeah.
we would,
But I mean, we aren't a business. We are a government. We are representative. We need to be fiscally responsible. I think we do a great job of that. But there's part of me that says, if you have 114% over your budget, are you being responsible with the money currently?
So the 34%
Is of the total expenditures of the last adopted budget. Mm-hmm.
What was the last total?
13, I think, yes, yeah.
and Graham's point is
We would be in the minority of the total expenditures of the most recent adopted budget. I'd have to pull up the policy to give it to you exactly.
balance is more than our budget, about 14%.
Okay, look at the 5-year forecast.
Oh, this 34 is just your base, like your bare minimum.
Oh,
Yeah,
that's
what
a
I'm
policy.
Yeah, so if you're actually talking about that, we are 3 times.
I'm sorry.
No, what do you, we'd be in the minority of what?
It's quite normal for places to have over 100% fund balance. Going below that, we would be in the minority.
So that, I'm gonna steal one of Brad's questions that he asks every year again. I mean, if I had $16 million in the bank, the first thing I would do is tell my boss, see ya, because I can certainly live off of 4%.
I don't ask that every year.
Don't say this is my question.
Okay, I'm ad-libbing some of the work, but I mean, if we, the question that Brad being asked each year is, that set 16 million sitting in the bank, I mean, it seems like it should be generating at least 4% at this point in time. So, what, I mean,
It's a little below 4 at this point. It started out the year at 4, but it's a little below that now.
But if I think I've asked this question of Jesse before, is that you're thinking about the stock market on average goes up 6 to 7% per year, but that's because you could be in equities, but we have to be more conservative, right? That's where I was going, was we have to be
Yes.
more conservative with our investments.
so I mean, if we were even in, I mean, I guess what I've heard in the past, I mean, we could have taken half that money and put them into a CD a couple of years ago or a year ago, and we would have been making 5%. So, I mean, are we so restricted that we can't even invest in things that have guaranteed returns for better than what we're getting right now?
Because we've been using the trust and things, I can't fully answer that question at this point. I would have to do a little more research, but yes, we are restricted in what we can invest in.
I mean, at this point, it feels like it makes more sense to us to take the $16 million and just start buying up property, because it seems like we'd make more money in the long run than 5%, I mean, than 3%.
Well, and I mean, another just hypothetical and what others do, you know, is buy property to build a community center or something like that. Well, when you have money in the bank, you can put a big down payment and not have to take out as much debt. So that's what that's where we have to kind of decide, or you guys have to decide as a council where you want the town to go. If all you want us to do is just manage daily and not add any amenities, not do anything else, then the logic of, well, yes, we should just charge what we need to pay makes sense. But if the town wants to grow, you have to have those additional funds.
So you're saying for the future, the 114% that we would have in the fund balance could then, in a future budget, be allocated into a special fund to be able to say, we want to put it aside for this parks project, this engineering project, that kind of thing.
Not the full 16, but
No,
because of but yes,
Yeah,
that's
yeah.
exactly what I'm, you know, okay, if we wanted to do something, here's $1 million, we can put it over there.
Yeah.
So it's on the balance sheet, but it's not in fund balance, it's just an asset. Sold it, you have that.
And to the contrary of Stephen and Graham's questions is, the way that I have looked at it in my head, which is the chart that Jesse said was helpful earlier, well, she didn't say, she said we said that it was helpful. But I look at it as, is it reasonable to ask the average homeowner in town to pay $77 more this year to provide the high level of service that you get? That's I think that's the simplest question. And a Socratic response to the, why don't you spend some of the $16 million?
I mean, my argument is time value of money, and I would rather keep that, allow people to use their money, those $77, if we can stay above 100% fund balance for a year. Because I think, to Brad's point, you mentioned before, we have a lot that potential new change is coming, and it seems that we're raising the rate when we might not we don't necessarily need to this year. We do in the future, I fully acknowledge that, I think. But it's also, there's uncertainty out there, and we don't know what some of this stuff what will happen.
I guess I'm concerned, I personally am concerned that our budget is growing at a rate of almost 10% every year. We're now, what, close to $14.5 million, up from 13 last year. I mean, that seems like, to me, that seems like a lot of growth, and it seems to be consistent. I mean, just a couple of years ago, we barely crushed it over 10, and now we're all the way up to 14.5. So, well, that
14.1 million is the budget,
14.1 million, right?
right?
I mean, I think those, go back to what we said earlier on, a lot of our expense is stuff we can't cut.
I mean,
It's kind of out of our hands.
1.45 million is transfers to capital projects as well.
Okay, and what is that? Can you just tell me that?
you would see that 1.45 million in the general fund had we not created another fund. It's, the splash pad chemical building. They're things that we would have in the budget anyway, but because they're larger capital projects, there's just a new fund that we're putting them in. That's the difference there.
And my understanding is the $500,000 for that building is still just a penciled in cost, right?
Yes.
We're just going up for that one. Yeah, fingers crossed. We got a number back for just the design work of it, and we're still kind of filling the waters with that. It's just, there's a lot of stuff that goes into that, just with code requirements and, yeah, it's a big piece. I don't think we're gonna need more than that, but I definitely would not budget lower.
And solid waste is a huge part of our budget. I mean, we're budgeting over $1.5 million for solid waste. That goes up every year.
And Stephen, I had a similar question as you did as well when I was, over last summer, thinking about, do I want to run for this position and looking at the budget and wondering like, well, how did it go up? How did everything go up?
Yeah.
And I think part of that is, like we talked about, like, do we want police cars that are operating at the highest level of efficiency? Do we want a splash pad that works, or one that's, you can sit on this hot cement because the water doesn't work this summer? Or a pay increase for staff, because then if you lose somebody because the next town over is paying more money, then you got to go through the process of doing that. So the question is, what don't you want in that sense of when the numbers go up, what would you cut?
Yeah, I mean, I've been through this budget, and in the past, and I know that we're running pretty thin here, but it's still difficult because we raised taxes last year, and so we would be looking at another tax rate this year. So it's just, again, going up at a rate of 10% a year, that's going to be tough to stomach. But $500,000 of that is splash pad, which there's no money next year. Did I not see any funds for the splash pad to be redone next year?
So that's what we did in this budget, is we removed the spheres and we're replacing it with the flush jets, and that's happening right now, as we speak. However, the only thing we're fixing with this is just that chemical piece, how we feed the system.
Okay. I apologize, but in the notes over here, it says this is in preparation for redoing the splash pad. Did I read that wrong? It says necessary for compliance. Until this is underway, the splash pad upgrade cannot proceed. So, does that mean that the sphere
We're only replacing what you see. The spear's the only thing that's getting taken away. Nothing internally can be done.
And so again, for that particular line item, is that the sphere upgrade? Or is that, we can't upgrade the system beyond what we're gonna be doing this year?
Exactly. This is all that the county will approve. And I know it gets a little confusing. I promise it was hard for me to kind of grasp what the county's willing to approve and not. So it's a little out of my hands. However, this is just the safety portion for the public that we're taking out. The other part that we're trying to fix is our system is honestly almost 100% manual. I would love to walk you over there. I know Mike kind of went and took a field trip. It's hard to imagine it, but this is truly just to get our chemical system to match what's out there now. Because if something were to happen, it would have to shut down to meet code.
Is that a fund balance appropriation?
Yes,
Yes. Fund balance.
yes,
Capital expenditure.
yes. So with the current tax rate, we're appropriating 1,013,000, and that would be 500 of it. Now, with the 2-cent tax increase, we're appropriating less than 200,000.
Let me sum this up. I know this. Go ahead.
Okay, so,
My summation's gonna answer all this.
okay. Okay, in the past, we've said 1%, roughly, was 250 grand.
400,000.
Yeah.
400 grand this year.
Yes, it's around 400.
Okay,
That changes every year based on the values and what your tax rate is.
okay,
So
okay.
here's what I'm hearing. Are you finished?
Yes.
This is my summation. I was gonna go over that too. Sounds like we've got, two schools of thought. We've got to vote at some point. One school of thought is, I'll point this way, then I'll point this way, not point. But I think we all agree, expenses are as tight as they probably can get. You can't lay off staff, you can't cut salaries, you can't not have a police department, you can't not do safety things. Expenses are tight. Well done. Y'all done a great job. So now the question is, how do you pay for it? Pay for it either by a 2-cent sales tax, 2-cent property tax increase, which nets 800 additional $1,000, or 1 cent, which nets $400,000, and then take 600,000 out of the grant, out of the fund balance instead of 200. Any tax increase and take 800,000 out of fund balance on top of the $1 million out of fund balance. Does that make sense? There's 3 paths.
I didn't totally follow that. The million out of fund balance is with the no tax increase.
Yeah.
Okay,
Right, because you already got 200, so scenario Alex's recommended budget is 200 out of fund balance and 400 out of new property tax.
yes, yes. Right,
No,
800, yeah.
So $1 million,
Yes.
200 out of fund balance, 800.
Yes, yes, yes.
So if I'm Mike, I want to keep that because expenses are tight. We need the emergency funds. Graham, or someone like Graham, I'd say, well, let's take the 800,000, just take it out of the fund balance, lower that to an appropriate number because we're 114 over budget. Or do something in between, which is 1 cent sales tax,
400,000.
400 over here, so it's 600. Those are the 3 options I see us voting on, right? I can't think, because expenses are tight. Y'all have done a great job on that. Notwithstanding, we might have some staffing 10% low, but so are revenue projections low, I think. So those are the 3 sort of scenarios I see.
Everything that's in this CIP in the 26-27 column, is it funded?
Yes. If it wasn't funded, we moved it out into a future year on the CIP. But everything that's on the notable items list isn't necessarily funded.
There's a couple items there that I think maybe we might want to close. I know that they would be kicking the can down the curve. Like the streetscape engineering plan for in front of the town, in front of the town hall. I mean, I'm not sure unless we're gonna move on that, that seems, I mean, that's $150,000 right there. So that seems like it's something that could be, kicked down the curve, but.
So half a cent reduction.
Well, either that or we're eliminating the part that we're taking from fund balance. Yes.
Well, let's just level set because we don't have three members here tonight. What we're doing, I think, is, I would say I'd love to kind of have that philosophical discussion at the council level. Balance to a more appropriate safety net. Relatively small tax increase and break it up monthly to the average homeowner and all that stuff. Keep very strong fund balance. Where do we leave tonight? What would be helpful for council tonight?
I proposed 21 cent like 3 years ago, and y'all didn't like it.
Now
And now we're there, in exactly the year that I said we would need it, so. I mean, I wanted to do the jump one big time, but. I mean, we've kind of known this was coming, so.
And the question is, do we see inflation continuing at a similar rate? Where if we do 2 cents now, does that mean next year we might only have to do 1 cent? Or if we do 1 cent now, does that mean next year we have to do 3 cents?
Yeah. If you look at Jesse's projections, it looks like you do 2 cent now, you don't really do anything else.
That's our proposal, yes, right now, is to just do 2 now and leave it alone.
And that, just so you know, that's kind of one of the things that we talked about at one time, is taking and saying the revow is gonna be 4 years, that we bump the taxes to get us through to the revow. And then we would continue that trend every 4 years. At that point in time, we probably, last year, the numbers said we should have been about 21. Because even now, we're still taking some of the fund balance, even with 2%.
One other question, which is a hypothetical, but is there any chance that with pending legislation, our hands are tied? Or is the thought that even if something like that were to pass, that it would not be implemented until a future year?
Well, yeah, there's still a pretty long runway, right? It'd have to, I think it's still gotta pass some general assembly hurdles. And then it'd have to go on the ballot, right? Then it would have to come back to the general assembly.
Well, I'm saying if it's not a constitutional amendment, if it's just a straight up piece of legislation that says no, there's gonna be a change to the way property tax is done.
Oh, if they did it that way?
Yeah, that was really my question, that was too vague.
Yeah, I haven't been tracking that part of it. Have you seen that?
Probably would be July 1, 27.
Okay.
To the rate we set now,
Although theoretically, they could do something in June immediately, but they don't seem to go too fast. So I would say that's not likely, but they would have the power.
Just like to add on to your question. I mean, when I look at us compared to some of the other municipalities, is it possible that we would even be impacted by that? Because, I mean, there are municipalities in the news, it seems like they're targeting municipalities that are charging like 38, 39, 40% or percent. And they're raising it at a high percentage each year. It's like, so would we even, do we think we would even fall in scope of what the changes were?
Last I read was the sum of, as if you could add sum of growth of population and growth. So if they were each 2, then you were limited to 4% growth. That seems to be high, and so I don't know. Charlotte had that in the late 80s, and the tax rate would far outpaced what we actually did if you used that formula. So I don't know what kind of monitor or control they would put on that, because for any urban center, it would seem to far exceed what you were going to do.
Well, I mean, that's the thing, is it's all been, feels like in the news reports I've read, articles, it seems all very hypothetical with very little grit to it. And so it's sort of like we're trying, I mean, so, but when they have talked about it, it seems like they were kind of shooting for kind of more extreme circumstances. That's all.
Yeah, no way to know.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing, is like, might go to, the way I understood they were gonna do is they, I mean, originally, I guess, they basically pass a framework, and then it would go back, and then they would decide on what they really wanted to do. So,
That was my understanding as well, yeah.
I don't know.
One way to find out.
So,
So what you're saying is we should take and raise it to 35%, and then that way we're covered for the next few years.
Steve Ayers. So there's no confusion as who spoke those words. Jesse, you gonna say something?
well, I was just gonna ask, so what, we have potentially a budget meeting on Monday before the council meeting. So what exactly would you like back by then? Because we do have a calendar that we need to keep, because I will be out of the country, so, for a couple weeks. So we need to make sure that we know exactly what y'all want by that last meeting of May 18th. Otherwise, we will not be able to adopt a budget on June 8th.
We've got, May 11th next Monday, and then the following Monday, May 18th. So we've got a couple more meetings, so hopefully
So
get
we
to
decide on May the 18th, very straight.
Yes, I'll have time to get things done before I leave. Yes,
We just couldn't have a meeting in between May and
Greece.
18th.
Oh, really?
yes, for a wedding.
That should be fun.
I mean, I can kind of gauge where the votes are.
Do you? I don't know.
I,
We got
well,
three people
because-
not here, actually. I don't
And
know.
I don't know what my own vote is yet,
Well,
so.
no, I mean, I
You're a
think,
minority, I would imagine.
yeah.
So you're in the minority?
I mean, I would even, I came into it thinking perhaps a phased, the 1% then to next year.
Yeah, it's a tough one.
Because I mean, unless there are items in the actual budget we want to cut or go back through, it seems to your point, this is more of the council.
This is where I am today, at least. I'm like Alex's work. And I love the idea of every year point, inflation goes up every year. Still feel like if we can get through the next reval with a 2-cent increase, 3 years of really nice. That's kind of where I am today. I am still curious about the street maintenance. Up by $200,000 without me knowing it. costs and what is, I get all that to the net effect of what if we take a cent
Well, I just thinking in my head, the math, if we were doing 800,000, the 1.2 would have meant that we were only receiving 400,000 in Powellville, and now we're receiving 560. So,
But the budget said we should be doing 1.2
I
for next year.
can't,
I may have misunderstood that. I thought we were planning on allocating.
Sort of feel like we probably need to have a conversation about it seems like we have a lot of citizens that are unhappy with the slurry paving. So I wonder if it's worth, I know it's kind of expensive to talk about, but it seems like a large group of our population tends to be unhappy when it's done. And a lot of them seem to be unhappy even months later. And I think it's worth a discussion on whether or not opportunity for this, if it's gonna make everybody angry at what they think their house should look like or street should look like. I know it's a cost versus happiness scenario, but it just seems like every time we do a neighborhood, people are unhappy and they're told that it's gonna get better, and it doesn't seem like it gets better. A lot of those people continue to be upset.
What time is our meeting on the 18th?
5 or 5:30.
5:30.
They're all at 5:30.
Okay. So. I don't know if we can get the vote right now.
Yes.
You're on Alex's recommended budget?
Yes.
Okay, I'm leaning that way too.
Couple things just to clarify, because, you know, we're staff, we wanna kind of support you guys, because it's at the policy council level. I heard, Graham, you say you wanted a history of fund balances, we can get that. Brad, I heard you say a history of, or basically, what's the right budget for the street maintenance now? You know, how has that changed, things like that, so I can work with Kevin and Jesse on that. Help me
Yeah.
understand that, so we can
We
get
had a multi-year plan to spend a certain amount of money to bring the streets into conformity. I felt like it was a finite period of time. To get ahead of the deferred maintenance.
maybe a summary of that.
Where are we now?
Okay.
How long does that expenditure go? Or is it in perpetuity?
Part of this budget though is
To redo the PCI index?
Yeah, we'll get a good inventory of where we're at road wise.
That's by this time next year, we'll have that done, you're saying?
I would hope so, right, Kevin?
Yeah, how long does that take? A couple months, maybe?
Yeah. I'm curious, that,
Let me know.
the 114
I'm gonna pickaxe my road. So
grams, 114% over 100%. I don't know what that delta is. Number 14. Going back to Graham's point about where
find my,
14% of our $14 million budget.
yeah.
Okay, so Graham was, I thought I heard Graham say that we're a quote policy that the council could consider is in addition to the minimum 34%. There could be a maximum of every year if you have more than 100% of your budget.
I would go over 100, but I'm just floating it out there. And it would be 5% of our fund balance if we fully funded the budget this year, instead of raising taxes.
The comment I will make about fund balance is that these are estimates. We never know what fund balance truly is and what the available fund balance is until the audit is complete. So like, even if I were to give you fund balance numbers right now for '26, they would just be estimates.
And the audit completion date is,
December 31st,
so it's a long way away.
yes.
I misheard, I thought Graham was thinking about policy, but that would be a huge number.
No, I think I mean,
Part of that.
I would love to see what we could potentially. I hate the fact that we would be raising taxes and still be taking money from fund balance. Feels to me like if we're gonna raise taxes, we should have, in my definition of a balanced budget. Because it seems like we're still snatching cash from our savings to pay the bills, so to speak, and yet we're still raising taxes. So, and could get comfortable with that, knowing that $500,000 of that is the building, which would bring us back down below that 200,000. So I think that might be just one thing I would ask is there something that we could cut to get us back to where we truly are quote unquote balanced with the 2%? Yeah. That would be streetscape design, like something. Well, I mean, like I said, I hate to raise taxes and still be stealing from the fund balance. Seems like we're not really raising taxes quite enough.
You're looking for the household definition of a balanced budget, basically.
Yes. Or how my wife would explain it to me. I mean, even if you raised it to around 21% instead of 20.9, that would cover. And we do away with the streetscape. I mean, that would be enough to bring us to a balanced budget, in my terms.
In your terms. Yeah, but it's a balanced budget using a small amount of very large fund balance. That's more taxes, more higher levy rate.
The problem that I have, and I've said this before, is that other than a couple of things, I feel like we're just keeping the wheels on the bus.
We're supposed to.
But,
Not supposed to.
but there are some expenses that we are going to start to accrue that we're gonna need to have large outlay as payments. I mean, like, we kind of skipped on the air conditioner because it was so expensive last year, right? So we basically fixed the broken system, but effectively left the bad system operational. I think for me, it feels like a lot of times we end up spending money to do half the job because we don't want to spend the full money to do the full job. I guess that would be my one thing is like, I don't want to feel like we're raising taxes, doing all this stuff, spending money, but we're not really moving things forward. We're just kind of patchworking it until the next time we have to spend some more patchwork money.
So,
Well, I do. I've said it before. Because I think we have public property, right? We have the town hall, we have the park, but we're also sitting on some other properties that I don't know what our intent with them really is. It sounded like, to me, my understanding is those were we wanted them to have control, but they're not going to be public. In the sense that it's owned forever by the taxpayers. So to me, that's like $3 million on the book that isn't just going to sit there. It's not like building a Parks and Rec department building, which I know you want.
For me?
No.
Oh.
Or, you know, building an additional office for personnel. It's that these are properties that will come off the book at some day when we so choose. So that I always keep that in the back of my mind. Like it's not that, oh, we're constantly dipping balance, and I do think that it's something to be worried about. But at the same time, I always build in those properties knowing that they're going to come off, or at least that's the hope. Like, but I also want to. I think we do need to sit down and have this conversation because I also think we. Just jumping into next week, but I think we need to have a conversation about what our town center vision is. Because I just spoke to the developer over Pleasant Plains. They raised a good point, and I actually think the point backfired on their argument. That's a different story, but I do think that maybe we need to revisit that and then ask what are we going to do with these properties. Because you can't, it's chicken and the egg, right? We have properties that we want to sell. We're talking about budget constraints. Are we going to do both? I mean, are we going to handle the budget? Are we going to sell these properties? Are we going to invest in them? Because I would actually, I would be in favor of going up to your 21% and doing some of those homes, because I think right now they're an albatross, and we need to demolish them because no developer wants to come along and buy just a home. If they then have to invest money, and I hate to say you have to invest money to get money if you're trying to turn this property.
Oh, see, I was even worse than that. I was joking with Alex today that we probably unfriendly condemn the one corner. That way we would have this whole shot. Or
I'm not gonna go. That again with Stephen Ayers.
So we've got a.
no.
Yeah, those are great. So that's more of a big town center discussion about property ownership and vision. We do these quarterly workshop type things. I feel like that should be one we have to kind of. Mike and John weren't sitting here when we bought the buildings. You weren't either. So
22nd, I think, is the next one.
Prior to your regular meeting.
Okay, that might be one we do. It's just to revisit, catch up on the property ownership. What the plans are? Have they changed?
Again, I do think, I think, I've mentioned it before, I think that does feed into the budget because we've had these for, I mean, since I've been on council, 5 years. No traction, no headway. Now granted, the tractor dealership, that's something else, but these other properties.
We were actually talking before you got here. I mean, just transparency. I mean, one of the things that we're talking about is once that building, something's going to happen to that building at some point. I mean, right now, our Parks and Rec fill that entire campus up with cars when we have something. So something we need to talk about, unfortunately, is parking for large events. I mean, and you'll have to tell me, was the Spring Fest, was it considered to be a large event? Okay, so is it on par with Stallings Fest? Okay, so that's not too bad then.
Yeah, I would say it's probably slowly creeping to be bigger.
Really?
Yes, what I responded to Councilmember Ayers, he asked me about that. We've got two options. What I'll try to do now is to plan the event, to size it based on the available local parking. I'm very thoughtful about that. The other option, if you want to make the events bigger, is to kind of shuttle people back and forth, which we've done in the past. But a little bit different of a calculation here.
I guess what I'm trying to say though is that when we lose that parking there, I mean, we are effectively, that is, something happens to that building, we shouldn't be scrambling to think about how we're gonna handle parking.
Sure.
Because most of our events do have parking over here now, don't they?
Yes, sir, almost all of them.
Almost all, which I sort of feel like we're getting ready to get into a situation where our Parks and Rec team is no longer gonna be hampered by ideas and personalities and personnel. They're gonna be hampered by, you can't have that event because there's only enough parking for 100 people.
There's a shopping center across the street. There's lots of parking if you think about it. But let's put that on until June 22nd, workshop. Just town center review with special emphasis on what we own, what we paid for it, what the plans were, what they could be now, what's changed. If we sell property, where does the money go?
If we give up those properties or choose to redevelop them, where does everything inside of them live in the interim time too?
Yeah, all that stuff.
Well, see, that goes towards the fact that we're gonna redevelop them. It's almost like we're out of space with the buildings we have. Because once again, we chimped out a little bit when we built this building. We didn't build it with the necessary storage it was supposed to have to some degree. So, I mean, that's just concerns that I have.
So next Monday, I think we do probably have a budget conversation, David, John, or here before the meeting. Alex's, what do we ask you to bring?
We're gonna look at the street maintenance,
Yeah, street maintenance.
history, what's the multi-acre plan, where are we now? And, ideas for cuts to get away from using fund balance.
Could part of a cut be offset by an increase in planning fees and zoning fees?
Be hesitant to bank on that for several reasons. First,
Not guaranteed revenue.
yeah, it can be volatile, you know what I mean? For two reasons. One is just happenstance, right? When kids come in. If you raise fees significantly, could there be effect on that? I don't know. And then also the sewer capacity crunch. We don't know exactly when that will hit, right? It's probably gonna come quickly. Be hesitant to bank on that, if for no other reason than the volatility of it.
Into the curb gutter that stormwater funds could be used for?
When we do curb repairs, we do stormwater, we can chalk that up to stormwater.
But that's not part of the maintenance budget.
Correct.
That's just mainly resurfacing.
Correct, yeah.
Yeah, it's resurfacing and preventative stuff.
I think the discussion for us is philosophically about fund balance, use again, tax rate level, or manager's recommended budget. That option buys us 3 to 4 years. The no option just puts it off 1 year, which may be the right thing to do given that we raised taxes last year. There's a decision that's just, I think, where we are.
I'm sorry, Graham, I neglected to mention the fund balance history as well. So I added the to-do list as well.
I won't be in as nice a place as Greece, but
All right, anything else?
Nope.
Going about 2 hours. No.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, everyone.
we need to do a motion.
Yes.
Motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn. Motion, so moved.
Second.
Where will you do, Steve?
Huh?
Yeah.